Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of The Rock Experience with Mike Brunn. On this episode, I'm excited to have with me JJ French, and we'll talk all about his new book, Twisted Business. JJ will share with us a bunch of great stories, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy this. So let's jump in and let's get started. All right, so let me just start off by saying congratulations. First off, the forthcoming book, Twisted Business, comes out next week. You obviously have managed the band for a long time. You've done speaking engagements. To me, this seems like a natural progression for you to write a book. Was it as natural as it would seem to me? Was it easy for you?
Is that fire? Are those fire engines my fire engines on my side? I guess. Welcome to New York City.
Yes, they are. Well, I don't hear them, but
and no matter how many podcasts I do, I have to say to people, by the way, if we're interrupted by fire engine, police car shootings, and whatever, understand we're in Manhattan.
Well, I'm a New Yorker, so I get it.
Okay. I needed to write a book, but the speaking engagements were the catalyst, because when you do speaking engagements, the first thing the agent says is, "Where's your book?" Right. It's almost like you're a band. Where's your album?
Right.
Sure. So I was doing a lot of speaking engagements, and I was one of the only speakers that were speaking without a book. And I needed a book. And my mentor, Steve Farber, who co-wrote the book with me, is a professional speaker. As he got me into it, as well as an author. He's had a couple of bestsellers. So I believe in collaboration. I always believe collaboration is important. And in this case, I said to Steve, help me do it. And if it wasn't for Steve, the thing is the story of Twisted is like War and Peace. It's like it goes on and on and on, and it's voluminous. And I can tell those stories. And, you need someone to go, stop. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. There's 1,000 stories that didn't make the book because it just didn't, it didn't need to make the book. Right. And there's sequels that could happen. So what made the book was important. So I needed Steve to do it. So it was 5 years in the making.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. One of the things I took from this is that, like you said, there's lots of stories that could be told, but even from a young age, you were into the business side of it, which I found very interesting reading through the book, right? Whether it was when you were dealing drugs, whether it was when you were selling Boy Scout cookies, right? So you always had like that business side of you. What do you think made you gravitate towards that?
Well, I went from Boy Scout cookies to firecrackers to drugs, ultimately to heroin. So I guess Boy Scout cookies led directly to heroin. I would tell people, be very careful joining the Boy Scouts, because you never know where it's going to take you.
That's great.
I'm a New York City kid. There's a certain thing about being a New York City kid whose father is a jewelry salesman on 47th Street. You know what I mean? The whole, the whole shtick, the whole thing that goes with it, and all my friends and the New York City hustling scene. New York is a very special place. Manhattan is a very special place. I told my daughter when she was born, I said, if you are comfortable in Manhattan, you will be comfortable. Everywhere else is going to be slow.
Agreed.
If you think that this is nothing, then nothing else is going to be nothing. Trust me.
Right.
Because New York has such an energy about it. And I got swept up in the energy, but I also was born at the right place at the right time. In 1952, I was 15 when Sergeant Pepper came out. I was the perfect hippie age. So I was able to take advantage of the Fillmore East and all the shows that all you guys wish you were old enough to have heard, because you hate people like us. So when I say to you, I saw Zeppelin as an opening band, because I had nothing else to do that afternoon. I went down there and I bought a ticket for $5. And then, by the way, if I say, by the way, the following summer Zepp played in the park, and it was $1. Tickets were $1. So you go to the Schaefer Festival, it was $1. or $1.50 in the front and $1 in the bleachers. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is Schaefer Festival was an open-ended concert, which means that you could just sit outside.
Right.
Because so what happened was, if you got down to the Shaver Festival and it was sold out, you sat on a blanket and just got stoned and listened to it. So it didn't
Right.
matter.
Yeah.
So you all were sick of hearing the fact that, oh, I saw Jimmy last week and Jeff Beck the week before and Rod Stewart the next week, because that's what it was. It was every week, multiple times a week, cheap.
Right. Well, to me, I never get sick of hearing those stories. That to me is like the great part of rock and roll, that time period.
It's a great part of rock and roll. So I was at the bullseye period where sex, drugs, rock and roll, politics, anti-war movement, civil rights, all of it kind of coalesced. And I was in the dead center of it. And I basically, between dealing and playing in bands and protesting against the war and pro-civil rights, I was multitasking. You know what I mean? It was, and so I never thought anything about it.
Right.
You know why? Because it wasn't just me. There was a whole generation of us out there.
Sure.
It wasn't just John doing this. It was like all my friends, Jewish, not Jewish, religion had nothing to do with anything. All that was common to all of us was, did you want to party? Did you want to get wasted? And did you like the music? And if that was the commonality, that's all that mattered. So there was hundreds of us that took advantage of that time, but very few survived intact.
And you quit that cold turkey, pretty much that whole lifestyle, which I find absolutely amazing. I find that so hard to believe, because you have some great stories in the book about some of the situations you put yourself in, and to be able to just quit that cold turkey that's incredible to me.
Well, the phrase "there but for the grace of God," I witnessed the destruction of many people to come to that conclusion. And I finally woke up one morning and went, at the rate I'm headed down, I'm either going to be dead from an OD or from a murder, like, doing a drug deal in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Sure.
And as it turned out, I nearly OD'd at the end, and I was robbed at knife point, my last deal. Yep. And I was dealing out of my house, and my mother knew what happened. And when the guys left, they had robbed me. They put a knife to my throat, ripped me off all my money and drugs. She said, "You just got robbed, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "It's over." Like, she got a sense that it was over. And I said, "Yeah, it's over." And so it ended, and I saved myself.
That's an incredible story in the book, because you actually paint the picture where your mother was walking into the room as you're being held by knife around the neck. And I'm just like, I can't imagine that as a parent myself, seeing my son in that situation.
Yeah, well, they had the knife on my neck, and when my mother started moving the door, they took the knife and put it around my back, so she didn't see it. Right. She said, "Everything okay?" She knew these guys from my junior high school. Right. And they went, "Hi, Mrs. Segal, how are you?" And then they realized maybe they should leave. So she left the room. They took everything. They walked out the door. I closed the door. She looked at me. She goes, "You just got robbed, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "It's over." I said, yeah, it's over. So, maybe what you take from that is, you should pay attention and learn a lesson from this. When your mother says your drug dealing days are over, your drug dealing days are over.
There you go. That's right. Mom knows best, right?
Mom knows best. And, and my best friend and girlfriend became junkies, and both are dead. One died soon back then, and one died of cirrhosis of the liver recently, because she had an awful life, and her life turned out to be a tragedy. And that was the last vestiges of that whole hippie scene, which I walked away from and walked smack into a transvestite rock band. Right. So I don't know what was worse for my mother's perception. My son was a drug dealer, but now he's a transvestite. Right. But at least he's not doing drugs.
At least not doing drugs, but he's wearing more makeup than me.
Yes.
Oh man, one of the things I love with the book is just the whole way it starts in the dedication, right? So right from the top, it's the dedication is anyone who believes in endless chances. And I read that, and right off the top, I'm like, wow, this is going to inspire me. Hope, inspiration, follow your dreams. We know the story, Twisted Sister, signed a few times, that doesn't fall, he falls through for various reasons. But for you, everyone who believes in endless chances, what does that mean for you?
Well, I say in the book that I was turned down more times than a bedsheet in a whorehouse, and come back more times than Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers.
I love
that. And that's just not even with Twisted. That's with everything. Yeah. Twisted had a life that lasted 15 years. And then I went out for another 12 years without Twisted, and had unbelievable ups and downs, marriages that came and went, diseases, heart disease, 2 heart operations, one almost killed me. I lost everything, got bankrupt, had to get a straight job, worked at a pool hall overnight, worked at selling stereo equipment on the East Side, having to go to people's houses and seeing my records at their house and not wanting to say anything, because I don't want to get into one of those feeling sorry for myself thing.
Sure.
But there were nights that I'd be working on Lexington Avenue at the stereo store, sweeping up at 6 o'clock in the evening and going, so this is JJ French. This is where it's going. And I said, no, it's not. There's something else here. There's something else here. Yep. So Endless Chances has to do with the fact that if you keep yourself open enough for possibilities will happen. But if you don't leave yourself open for it, you're never going to have them. Yep. So on any given day, you can have a conversation that will change your life. Yep. But you have to be open to that conversation. And I don't mean to sound pious, and this is not religious. This is just like, what are you going to do? Put a blanket over your head and stay in bed? Right. Or are you going to get the hell out? When everything fell apart, it hurt. But, like I say in the book, I give you tools to deal with, incredibly bad situations. I explained to you how I went through them. I kept diaries to describe my mental state, to see how I evolved out of them. And the book does give you tools. That's the thing I love about the book. It's not just that I tell you the stories, but I tell you the results of the stories and my reaction to those stories.
Yep. It's not just an autobiography, right? So, and that's one of the things I thought was really cool about it. And you do talk about the Twisted business model. So just, I guess, explain that for people who haven't seen or read the book yet. Explain what the Twisted business model is.
Well, the book is a bizwar. So it's a business book and a memoir. And although many books are, no one ever called their book a bizwar. So I'm the first official bizwar. Yep. Okay. So business book and a memoir. So you get through the memoir stuff early. Yep. I lay the groundwork and explain to you why I became the person that I became. What happened with the Twisted method of reinvention that I discuss was a byproduct of the motivational speaking. So when I started doing the speaking engagements, everybody just wants to hear rock stories. That's all they want. They want rock and roll stories. And I got a million of them. Right. And if that's all you wanted from me was stories, I could just go on and on and on and on and on. You'd have to take a hook and pull me off stage.
Right. 7,000 shows under your belt. You got a million
whatever.
stories.
So what I did was I started composing in my head a 1.5 hour, a 75-minute presentation. In fact, I was told, come up with a 20-minute presentation, a 45-minute presentation, an hour presentation, and an hour and 15-minute presentation. Okay. And because I'm professional and I'm used to, and I understand time, yep. I went, okay, if you're giving me 15 minutes, I'll do this in 15. If you give me a half hour, I'll do it in a half hour. I have a good clock in my head. I know how to do it. As Steve Farber started to encourage me and promote me, I started to develop a theme in the stories, and I would take people through a timeline. And then one day on my walks in the park, because I also ran 2 marathons in the middle of all this, in the middle of the Twisted days too. I thought, wow, TWISTED. Like if you go to see a speaker, whether it's Tony Robbins or anybody else, they all have a theory. They're all either pushing a book, or they have a theory, or they have a theme, or they have something that you need to take away. They just don't talk. They actually are promoting a process, which they hope you'll buy. Sure. They hope that you will resonate to their, that their story resonates with you and you'll buy it. So I thought, what kind of theme could I use? And I thought, okay, the name Twisted is a great name. Everybody knows the word twisted. Sure. What if I could take those letters and make it mean something and then build a narrative? So the TWISTED became the core, yep. The Twisted method, and it stands for tenacity, because without it, you ain't got nothing. Yep. Wisdom, because without it, you ain't got nothing. Inspiration, because without it, you never did it to begin with. Mm-hmm. Stability, because if you don't have a stable environment in which to make your decisions, you will fall apart. Okay. Trust, because if you have partners, you have to trust each other. Excellence, because if you don't strive to be excellent, you'll never get anywhere. And discipline, you have to have the discipline to be excellent. Yep. So these were the 7 lessons that it turned out Twisted Sister used to make it. Now, that doesn't mean that if Dee didn't write the songs, it wouldn't matter. Dee writes incredible songs, and he's an amazing singer. And what I talk about in the book is I talk about the collaborative nature of success.
Yes.
Without them, you and me aren't talking.
Oh, without a doubt. In fact, I think you say something along the effects of successful people are not afraid to give credit to the people who deserve it, right?
Exactly. And Ahmed Erdogan, the chairman of Atlantic Records, said to me once, he goes, success is easier if you don't mind who gets the credit.
Right.
And I went, that's so simple. But most people are too egotistical and narcissistic to do it. I, on the other hand, go, D, I fully give you the credit for being an astonishingly great frontman and a great songwriter and a great singer. Mendoza, I give you full credit. You're a great producer and a great bass player. Eddie Ojeda, you're like The Rock. Your playing is perfect every time. AJ Pero, a magician, like one of the greatest drummers. Without that, you got nothing. In fact, your crew, you could throw your crew in there when you're touring because you rely on those guys. If they're not perfect, you look like an idiot.
Sure.
So it's collaboration. In the same way with Steve Farber, I needed a partner. Partners make you stronger. That's why marriages are theoretically supposed to work.
Sure.
Because partnerships make you stronger.
Yep.
So I take you through the history of the partnerships of the band, good, bad, and ugly.
Yep.
I take you through the history of all the ups and downs, good, bad, and ugly, and what happened to us in the process and how we dealt with them.
Yep. And you cover that under the wisdom section, I believe, if I remember right? Because it took that wisdom to recognize that you needed to trust those other people around you and know that D was a great songwriter, a great frontman, and that your success as a whole was dependent on you trusting it and having the wisdom to see that you had to give credit to all those people as well.
Yeah. And I didn't know I had any wisdom. If you were to ask any of my teachers in school, they said, that guy, he talks too much and, we threw him out of class. He's an idiot. Right. Where it all kind of came to me was the night that my mom died and the service, after the service was over, we had Shiva at the house and everybody left. And I'm sitting there with my dad and it's just me and my dad. And I'm 22 years old and I'm shell shocked that my mother has died because I was close to my mother. I wasn't close to my father. I looked at my father and I said, listen, you and I don't have much of a communication here. And I said, we have two ways we're going to handle this. We're either going to figure out a way to survive it or we're never going to talk again. You're a traveling salesman. So, for all intents and purposes, you can go on the road and we just won't talk, once in a while, let me know you're alive. And he said, well, what do you suggest? I said, well, you're not going to go to therapy because my father was one of those guys. That ain't going to happen.
Right.
That's just not going to happen. It's not even it'd be a great dream, but that's not happening.
Right.
So I said to him, how about this? You forgive me for all the stupid shit that I did, the drug dealing, the dropping out of school, the, rock and roll, all the shit that embarrassed you and made you, and had you, when I was bad, he used to take his belt out and whip me, which by the way, all the guys in the band's fathers did that. It wasn't just my dad. It was that time. Absolutely. That's how they did it. Yep. I said, if I can forgive you for whipping me and doing that, and you forgive me for being an asshole, and we shake hands on it, we never talk about it again, we'll move on, we can do it. Yep. And he said, you got a deal. And we shook hands. And I said, I only have one. Can I curse on this thing?
Yeah, go ahead. Say anything you want.
I said, I only have one favor. I said, mom just died. Could you stop smoking cigarettes? And he said, do you remember what you said to me when I asked you to stop smoking pot? Do the words "go fuck yourself" sound familiar? Yeah. I said, yes. I go, fair enough. So we shook on it. And I had a great 10 years with my dad.
And I know you have a picture of him holding the platinum album.
Platinum album, which you got just before he died. And they took the picture of it, which I didn't know until after I got home from the hospital. And he died. And then my wife said he got the record just in time. The record went platinum the day he died. That's a bittersweet story. Wow. But so my father, great year. We had a great 10 years. We talked all the time, talked baseball. How's the trip going? How's the band going? He came out and saw the band. I mean, here's my choice. Either do that or have nothing.
Right.
Okay. Some people look at me and go, that's brilliant that you did that. And I said, yeah, some people would say, screw that.
Right. Sure.
I'm never going to forgive him for what he did to me. Right. And that's true. That's not me.
Right. Right.
So
now, what do you think your parents would say now, looking at you all these years later, book writer, speeches, going from that kid that was the drug dealer, causing trouble for the parents? What do you think they'd say now?
Well, look, I have a brother who was a great school teacher who I talk about in the beginning of the book, about how we took different pathways. Yep. He took a very stable pathway. I took a crazy entrepreneurial pathway. Yep. Both of them are legitimate and both of them are fine. And he did what he did, a great school teacher, had a great career. You know, I opened the book with the story. My brother said, how do you run your life?
Yep.
I don't get this roller coaster shit. And I never thought about it till he brought it up to me. When he's described me my life, I'm like, wow, that's pretty fucking crazy.
Right.
I mean, you know, I mean, like bankrupt, like I'm too busy moving forward to think about the past. And I said to my brother, look, you know, I said, the world needs people like you and the world needs people like me. I think my parents would be proud for both of us is really the answer to that question.
Absolutely. Now, I'm a big Kiss fan, and I know Eric Singer, the drummer in Kiss, has said a number of times he works in the music business. It's not called music friendship. And that quote has always stuck with me for years because I'm like, well, that's very true. It's no different than me going to work in a company. You guys just happen to work in a band. But how did you balance that, being part of the music business side and running the business for Sister and still trying to maintain friendships in the band?
It's a very good question. You're the first person to ask that particular kind of question. Okay. So here's what I can tell you. The difference between the music business and what it sells the public versus any other business. Any other business, you got partners, you go to work, you come home, right? 9 to 5, 9 to whatever, you come home, that's it. You leave your work and you come home. I'm in the only business that sells the myth that it's a family.
Yep. True.
We sell this bullshit myth. And it is bullshit. But until you're in it, you don't know how much bullshit that myth really is. So you start out thinking it's going to be a family.
Right.
And you know, if you're smart, you look and go, this ain't going to be a family, or it's going to be a really rough family, but I got to figure out a way to coexist. Well, let's look at the Rolling Stones. So you have Mick and Keith. If you read Keith's book, you know, I mean, he says that Mick lives on one island and he lives on another. And if they want to write, they go to a neutral island. Now, the Rolling Stones are very rich and they can do that. But that's an example of how do you do it. Mick's not going to go to Keith's Island and Keith's not going to go to Mick's Island. It sounds like two little kids, doesn't it? I want to play in this playground. You're not coming to this playground. Let's find a neutral playground. So at the highest levels of the Rolling Stones, they had to find a neutral playground. So what does that mean for the rest of us? So look, me, Dee, and Mark text every day. Because there's always business to deal with. There's always projects. There's licensing. There's music licensing. There's new records. There's T-shirts. So every day. So when people say to me, "You get along with the guys?" I go, "Text every day." You know, now Dee lives in somewhere, and Eddie lives somewhere else. Dee lives somewhere else. So we're just like you. We're electronically connected.
Sure. Absolutely.
And we can text each other right away. Did you get this paperwork? Did you look at that? I sent it to your lawyer. You know, so we do business. But you know what? We're a 50-year-old concern now. We're 49. I've been 49 years this December. 49 years.
Incredible.
Dee and I have been standing on stage together since 46 years ago. Eddie Ojeda and I have known each other 52 years.
Crazy.
And Mark's sister was my first wife.
Right.
So you're going to ask me about the interconnectivity of this band? I mean, you know, think about that for a second. Eddie and I went to high school. I was married to Dee's sister, and Dee and I have been standing on stage together since 1976. So, I mean, did we go through a period of time that we didn't talk? Yeah, we did. But wisdom again, and I go into it in the book. If Dee and I did not have the meeting in my kitchen, which I go into,
it's a great story in the book,
in which we just lay it out on the line and clear the air, there would be no Twisted Sister reunion. At all. And the desire to have that meeting, I'm not going to say it was just me. It was Dee. I wound up with a triple platinum record. My mistake, it came back to me. It was supposed to go to Dee. I hadn't spoken to him. Every band who's been around for a long time, trust me, has people close enough to the band that like to talk shit about other band members. It's just the way they all believe they've got like positions. And there was one guy who I knew who was close to Dee. I wasn't particularly close to him, but I didn't want to call Dee. I hadn't spoken to him. So I said to this guy, you tell him to call me because you tell him that I have this record. What do I want to do with it? I don't want anything to do with him. And then I said to myself, give me Dee's phone number. And I left him a message. And he calls me back. And I hadn't spoken to him in years. And he goes, hey, I hear you had a kid. And I said, yeah. He goes, so did I. I said, oh, cool. How you doing? Okay. How was the bankruptcy? We both went bankrupt, you know. It's tough. And I said, I'm sorry about this record. And he said, I'm sorry, I turned it away. I didn't understand. I thought it was a demo from some band. I didn't realize it. And I went, I can mail it to you, but why don't you come in the city? And he goes, okay. And he comes over and we sat in my kitchen. And there was no agenda because there was no band. It wasn't like, let's get together, figure it out, make $1 million. There was no money there, nothing. All it was a desire to clear the air. And we did.
Yep.
And if we hadn't have done it, again, Twisted would not have reunited.
Right.
We have not had the extraordinary success we had in the reuniting. So there's wisdom again.
Without a doubt.
But we were forged in a brotherhood of the bar scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that bar scene was unique to the time and place. And if we didn't have those years of killing ourselves in the bar scene, we wouldn't have the underpinning structure to be able to go back and remember why we depended on each other.
Yep. That makes sense. Now, do you think it's become easier for you running the Twisted Sister business as you guys have gotten older, maybe a little bit more mature? Kids, like you said, does it become easier, or is it still just as difficult as it was in the 80s?
Oh, it's way easier now. First of all, they're happy I'm doing it because we all have the same interest. Right. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If I don't make money, they don't make money. Like, we all have to make money. Mm-hmm. And I need to make money. So therefore I'm making everybody money. And they're thrilled that I'm making everybody money, or they're thrilled. Listen, it's not blind stupidity. There's an appreciation for talent. Mm-hmm. Dee can do this, and Mark can do this, and Eddie can do this, and I can do this. It just so happens that this part is the predominant business these days, which is the licensing.
Sure. But you also touch on in the book, it's a matter of trust, and they've always trusted you to go to those business meetings and have the band's best interest, still split everything 20, including giving AJ's family their 20%. So you built that trust as well, which you touch on in the book. Yeah.
And as I always say, you can look at books anytime you want, you could care less, anytime. And they don't. And I go, why don't that's great that you don't. That's fine. Mm-hmm. And if you did, I could care less, because it's all there. Everyone is exactly the same all the time. Yeah. And I sleep well at night with that, sleep very well at night. We worked really hard. We came back. We're reaping the benefits of that work. And because the licensing of the music has been so successful, it doesn't hurt to have checks coming in on a regular basis. Right.
Of course.
So, but again, 30 years ago, if you told me about licensing, I'd say, what a marriage license, a taxi license. Mm-hmm. So when I talk about reinvention in the book, we had to reinvent ourselves into a licensing machine because we're not playing anymore. Do you know what I'm saying? So, sure. So when people say, how do you survive during COVID? I said, we didn't worry about COVID. We were already gone by COVID.
Right.
And our business didn't change during COVID. In fact, we had better years because Facebook licensed I Wanna Rock for a ridiculous amount of money. So, right. I didn't want to gloat with any band because all my other friends are out of work.
Sure.
Okay. They're all out of work. No one's on tour. Yeah. I'm sitting back there watching I Wanna Rock on a Super Bowl ad, Facebook, going,
cha-ching.
Yeah. and or the new Trish Dog commercial with "We're not going to take it." So I sit back and go, okay, that's cool. That's cool that we figured out a way to survive. Yeah. Without needing touring, but man, it affected everybody. I mean, all of our friends, and Leonard Skinner, Whitesnake. I mean, we know all these guys.
Sure.
I call them, how you doing? Things suck, man. We can't go out and play. Right. That's their financial focus. We didn't have to worry about that focus. I can't tell you, I'm such a genius. I knew that we're going to have COVID and no one's going to be able to work. So this is great. Right. I mean, I'd love to be able to tell you that I was that smart. But I can say that what pushing the licensing is about ensuring that the songs have a legacy. So how like some bands would say, well, I'll never have my music, sneaker commercial or whatever, right? Sure. That kind of stuff. Here's my response to that bullshit. Mm-hmm. There's 800 million songs recorded in the world, and there's 30 million new ones every year. There's too much noise. Yep. How is your song going to get heard? How is anybody going to know who the hell you are? I guarantee you, a kid may not know who Twisted Sister is, but you go, "We're not gonna take it," and he knows that. Mm-hmm. Instantly. So if that is the legacy of the band, at the end of the day, if I Wanna Rock and We're Not Gonna Take It is the worldwide legacy of this band used around the world, you know what? Don't suck.
No, and it's like you said, you're not afraid to reinvent yourself, whether it's following that licensing, doing producing for other bands, doing the speeches, the book now, right? You're always looking for ways to reinvent yourself. If you just stayed static, like you said, in 1980s, early 1990s, putting your song in a commercial was career suicide at that point, right? So, but you've reinvented yourself many times over the years.
Yeah. And I talk about it in the book that whether you realize it or not, you always reinvent. I mean, think about this. Every year, September comes around, first day of school, you got new clothes.
Yep.
You're trying to reinvent. You want to show the world something different. You go to change schools, you kind of reinvent yourself. When you go to college, it's a new chance to start over.
Sure.
When you graduate, it's a new chance to start over. If you're smart enough, you will take advantage of these chances to start over.
Yep.
It's like, wipe out the old, come in with the new. You get married, you've reinvented yourself. You get divorced, you reinvent yourself. You have a kid, you're always doing it, whether you realize it or not. If you understand that the evolution of life, it's constant reinvention, then you will be better prepared to reinvent and appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So the entertainment world is one of the roughest worlds anyway. So take COVID away. Mm-hmm. This is how it is in the entertainment world. You could have a #1 movie. You could have a #1 record. First question they say is, so what's your next project? It's like, excuse me, can I have 5 minutes to freaking appreciate, this, because next year you may not talk to me.
Right.
Next year if I don't have a hit record, you're not going to answer my phone calls and you're not going to want to do an interview with me.
Right.
So let me just enjoy this for a minute and then I'll come up with a solution. So we're always reinventing in the entertainment world. So it's not that that's unusual, but I never, until I wrote the book and really systemically started to review my diaries, which is in the book, I discuss how important diaries are because it gives you perspective to see how you overcame problems in the past. What I love about the book is that I teach you that in business, you run into challenges, crises, and catastrophes. And the ability for any business to get through crises, to understand the difference between a challenge, a crisis, and a catastrophe, and to absorb that and to be able to come back from it, that's a winning formula in life and in business. Yeah. And I also talk about proactive and reactive trauma. The difference between an offensive team and a defensive team in football is the offense knows a split second before the defense. Right. Well, if you know something really bad is going to go down, you can be defensively protected by making the chess moves you need to make. The reactive trauma and the reactive chaos that comes in your life is like getting a phone call saying AJ just died. Right. There's a reactive chaos right there. Talk about a catastrophe and a reactive chaos. You give it no chance to just like AJ was found dead in oh my God. Now, because the history of the band is such that we understood that you don't make a decision right away with that news. It's, what do they tell a prize fighter if you lose a fight? Don't decide to retire right after the fight.
Sure.
Right. And another boxing analogy, which I love, which is the Joe Louis analogy, which is when you get knocked down, take the 10 count.
Right.
Because you can never get back up so fast that no one doesn't know you got knocked down. So don't be a freaking hero.
Right.
Giving you 10, take 10.
Yeah. You talk about when AJ passed, right? And obviously now this is a friend of yours for 30 years, but having to go into that mindset of, first off, keeping you cool for the rest of the band, right? Not showing that panic, but then making a list of priorities, your immediate priorities, your short-term, your long-term priorities. I was actually surprised to read also that Twisted was talking about winding down already prior to AJ's passing, because I always thought, AJ passed and that led to the wind down, but I learned in the book, that's not true.
No, in fact, the Friday before AJ died was my last conversation with AJ, which followed a conversation with D, in which he said to me, listen, man, after this year, it's over. I'm telling you now, it's really over. It's really done. I'm retiring. So call the guys up in the band and tell them that this is really it. So I call Eddie, I call Mark, and I call AJ. And I go, hey, man, listen, I just need to tell you, I don't know what your plans are for next year, but D says this is it. So at the end of this run this year, hold on to your money, do whatever you got to do. It's over. And then I said to him, we just had a royalty check and he needed the money. And so rather than wait to come and get in the mail, he wanted to come in the city and get a check. And he said, I'll come in on Monday. I went, great. And then he said to me, by the way, I've been having trouble in my shoulder. See, we didn't realize he was having a heart attack at that point.
Okay.
He thought it was a muscle spasm. And he said, I'm going to quit Adrenaline Mob this weekend to get physiotherapy for the tour for the summer. So when you hear I quit Adrenaline, don't get freaked out. So he says that to me. Then I said to him, I'll see you Monday, Mr. Pirro. And he said, "Thank you, Mr. French," because that's how we
Yeah.
addressed each other. It was like always this funny thing. He liked Mr. French from Family Affair. So
Okay.
he used to call me Mr. French. And every time
Okay.
he called me Mr. French, I go, "Mr. Pirro."
Right.
So we end the conversation. He goes, "I'll see you Monday, Mr. French." I said, "I'll see you Monday, Mr. Pirro."
Mhm.
And that was it.
Mm.
And he died the next day. So yeah, that when I can get very emotional when I tell that story.
Of course, no, that had to be a very tough time for the band. Mike stepped in, did a great job on the drums. So, you obviously were able to go forward with that shows, but I could certainly imagine that being a very tough time for the band.
Yeah, because it was a family.
Yeah, without a
And
doubt.
we were all together, and AJ was a beautiful guy,
Mhm.
and he was a phenomenal drummer. And Portnoy is a phenomenal drummer, but they're different.
Of course.
They're very different kinds of drummers. And so AJ was like John Bonham was to Zeppelin. You know what I mean? He was like special to us. And I would come to rehearsal every year. We would get ready for the summer tour.
Mhm.
And every year we'd walk into this rehearsal studio on Long Island. And every year we'd tune up and get ready. And every year we would start off by playing Shoot 'Em Down. That was the warm-up song.
Sure.
And I looked to AJ and I go, "Mr. Pirro?" And he go, "Mr. French?"
Mhm.
And he would count off Shoot 'Em Down. And that became a process.
Right.
Come April, get ready for the European summer tour market. Come in, go over the songs, make sure we all remember them, blah, blah, blah. When that is taken away from you, you have to figure it out.
Of course. Yeah.
And I loved him dearly. He was an incredibly important cog in the wheel. And there's plenty of videos out there that show it. And Portnoy, what can you say about Portnoy that hasn't been said?
Right.
Ridiculous drummer.
Agreed.
Uber professional,
Mhm.
had such respect for AJ. We even said, "Hey man, do your Portnoy thing," because Portnoy can do some crazy shit.
Of course,
He goes,
absolutely,
"I'm not going." He goes, "No, I want to be true to AJ.
Mhm.
Play exactly what AJ played." In fact, during the set, when the AJ drum solo comes on,
Mhm.
Mike stops playing. We played a video of the drum solo.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely.
And Portnoy supported it. What can you say about that? I mean,
Of course. Now, I was
Very
surprised
lucky.
in the book that you read when I read it, that you said you don't really play much guitar anymore. I was surprised to hear that. Do you ever miss the days of playing guitar or miss even being?
No, I'm weird that way. When the band first stopped playing in '88,
Mhm.
I don't think I played a guitar for 5 years.
Hmm.
I just said enough already, So I have guitars all over the house,
Mhm.
and I can always pick a guitar up and make sure my fingers work.
Mhm. Right.
But here's the thing. Here's what COVID did do. I would have little side projects. We would play occasionally in little clubs in New York, little blues things because
Sure.
it's fun to do.
Mhm.
And I would periodically do it every 3 or 4 months, which means I have to stay in shape to go to rehearsal and to work out, half a dozen songs to play, which was still fun.
Sure.
As a blues band, it was me, the drummer for Lynyrd Skynyrd, Michael Cardelloni, the guitar player for Whitesnake.
Yep.
Joel Hoekstra lives around the corner from me.
Great guy. Great guitar player.
Joe Bonamassa's a producer. Bobby Held lives right down the street from me. He plays bass, songwriter. We had a great band.
Sure.
Benny Harrison, a local keyboard player. So we could always throw a band together in 2 seconds.
Mhm.
We called it the Pink Slip Blues Band. But because of COVID, we couldn't do it.
Mm.
So it really took me out.
Right. Now, in the book also, you talk about discipline being important, and you actually highlight some of the bands, Iron Maiden, Kiss, Metallica, who you felt all had strong discipline, and obviously they had successful careers. How important did you feel discipline was for Twisted Sister success? Obviously, there was these relationships that were a little tough, maybe sometimes in the 80s.
Well, if you read the book, you saw we put the gig list in the back.
Yeah, incredible.
How crazy is that list?
That's absolutely crazy.
It's absolutely
Yes.
freaking crazy.
Yeah.
So I did that just to show people that's the work that went in.
Yeah.
You know something? You ask Dee and Mark, you can't take those away. You can't take that out of our system.
Mm-hmm.
So the discipline was, well, I'll put it this way. I can make a joke and say there's 4 states of mind to a band. And this is my 4 states of performance mind. One is you suck and the audience sucks and you really question why you're even doing this thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then you're great and the audience sucks and you really are puzzled by that because that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You suck and the audience is great and you got away with murder and you are the happiest camper on the planet Earth and you're great and the audience is great.
Yeah.
And to strive for that is the key to being great. So Twisted Sisters, absolutely obsessive desire to be great and to blow away every band we played with as a matter of, oh God, how do I put it? We were very predatory.
Mm-hmm.
We were a predatory band. The agent said, you can make more money if you blow these bands away. You know, more people come to see. So our attitude is, we're going to blow you off the stage.
Sure.
But if you can blow us off the stage, go. Because the people are going to benefit by it. That means you are better. And when you're paying hard-earned money to see a show, you should get the best of everything, shouldn't you? You should get the best of everything.
Yes.
You should get the best Kiss, the best Judas Priest, the best AC/DC, the best Sabbath, the best Ozzy, the best Alice Cooper, the best Motorhead, the best Guns N' Roses, the best Twisted Sister. That's what you want. So our attitude is, we're going to play so good, we're going to force you to be better, because you're going to have to be better if you're going to get over better than us. But you're never better than us, because we are always the best. You know, and you have a great pride in that.
Yeah, and you touch on that in the excellence section of the book, right? And it's one of the things when I read that, I kind of paused and stopped. And you touch on the Einstein theory of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results is insanity. But you're like, no, in a band, you have to rehearse. You have to be the best possible. So when you go out on stage, you're not making those mistakes. The crowd's not seeing that. And when I read that, you really made me pause and think, like, I got to really rethink that whole saying about Einstein's theory.
Because everyone who's great at what they do are great because of repetition.
Yeah.
And I call it the boredom of excellence. and listen, there's a reason why there's only one gold medalist who wins skating and one gold medalist who wins skating, because they were up at 5 o'clock in the freaking morning when you wouldn't be up at 5 o'clock in the morning, doing it 1,000 times so that when the bell rang, they could deliver. Yep. So if you're not prepared to be that great, then don't have expectations about being that great. But if you want that, you better do that, because here's what happens. Repetition, whether you understand it or not, makes you better subliminally.
Sure.
You know, so we would come home from a club gig and we would have problems. And I would say to myself, tomorrow, we're not going to have that problem. We may have another problem,
right?
But we're not having that problem. And then there'll be another issue. And you go, what? Tomorrow, we'll solve that problem, but we're not going to have that problem. You know, if we didn't come in right here, we're going to figure that out. But then we're going to do the transition here, or the lights didn't work for this, or that didn't happen, or my battery ran out before. Well, I'll make sure that won't happen again. I'll change over to an outlet, whatever it is. If you don't learn a lesson from everything you do, you're an idiot, which is also wisdom too. Right. Which is recognizing what you need to do. So I'm really a big believer in the boredom of excellence. Excellence. Repetition makes you better.
Like I said, it made me pause and rethink some of the things I say in my life. Now, again, I'm a big Kiss fan. I knew you auditioned for the band in '72. I've known that story forever. I was shocked to hear that, though, you actually for 2 weeks played with them. I was like, oh, wow. You know, I thought it was like a one and done, in for an hour, half hour. So what was that like during that 2 week period?
You know, it's so long ago, I can hardly remember. I just remember they called me up a couple of times to come down, and I went down and jammed on several occasions. But I never imbued it with much more history than that. I never made a big Kiss. I never made a deal out of it. This whole thing, JJ and Kiss, was such bullshit. One time a guy said to me, you ever in another band? I said, well, not really, but I auditioned for Kiss in 1972. It didn't work out. Like, how honest can you be? Right. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't picked. I went, JJ was in Kiss. I was like, you know.
And you're open about that in the book. You said you weren't good enough at that time, right? So you're very open about that.
Yeah, and Ace was way better. I saw them when I saw them in the loft with Ace, it was like, whoa, they got the right guy.
Right.
They got the right guy. Ace was great.
Right. What do you think is more important these days, band or brand?
Oh man, that's without the band, you don't have a brand. So let's start at the beginning. Right. Whatever your core business is, you have to be good at it, and then you have to be good at marketing it. If you put the cart before the horse, then you've got nothing. So I'm never going to tell you that a brand is better than a band anywhere. I'm going to say a brand's better than any product the brand is supposed to be. Right. If the product isn't good behind the brand, what the hell good is the brand? Well, it's not good at all. So what gets me is this instant gratification that is taking over a lot of young people. You know, you watch The Voice, and some kid, gets a record deal, and he says, I'd like to thank the audience for sticking with me for 15 weeks. You know what I mean? And I'm standing there laughing my
Right.
ass off.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like, really, say that to AC/DC, say that to Kiss, say that to Judas Priest, say that to Scorpion, say that to Alice Cooper, say that to all of us came from 1973. Oh, thank you for 15 weeks.
Right.
Oh, it makes you want to throw up, you know? And then, of course, there's the ones that want to get a perfume line and a clothing line 5 seconds after their first hit record. That's not a mentality I come from. Do I understand it? I guess, but you know, it doesn't resonate with me. I don't see legitimacy and all that. But you know, listen, I also say you're not selling heroin to school children. You know, if people buy your shit, you know, if people buy it, who am I?
Right.
I'm not Yoda. You know, I may not buy it, but who cares?
But
I mean, who cares?
is.
Who cares what JJ thinks? You know,
Right.
JJ may be smart, but really, you know, my daughter once taught me a lesson. She came into my room and played me Britney Spears' version of Satisfaction. This was years ago. She thought I'd be interested in hearing it or something, and I almost threw up, you know. And I said to myself, you know, this is a teachable moment. I'm now going to play her the original Satisfaction. So this is like considered to be amongst the number of greatest rock songs ever, right?
Absolutely.
So I play. I go, sweetheart, glad you brought that in. And I play it, and she goes, that really sucked, Dad. And I thought carefully about her response. And I thought to myself, if I kill her now, there's a good chance that a jury of my peers may get me off as, you know, as justifiable infanticide. You know? Well, of course he killed her. She said Satisfaction sucked.
Right.
I mean, I'd kill her
Britney
too.
Spears version's better.
Yeah. I learned to shut my mouth after that. I learned to say, if that's what makes you happy. Look, my father didn't like rock and roll. My father thought it all sucked. You know, he looked at me. I said to him, why don't you like this stuff? You know, he's a classical music guy. Knew it really well.
Sure.
And he said to me in one of the most amazing statements, he said, everything after 1945, like he picked a year going back. So in other words, he's lumping everything.
Right.
The cumulative jazz, pop, yeah, Broadway, he's the whole kit and caboodle. And he goes, everything after 1945 sucked. He goes, it's just baby, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
and I thought, wow, I hope I don't turn into that.
Right.
You know, so when my friends go, rap sucks or whatever, I go, well, you could go, yeah, or all the country records sound the same, yeah. But the truth is that if you don't know enough about a music to care about the music, it all sounds the same of a genre.
Right.
You have to know it to care about it.
Yep.
And if you don't care about it, it's all the same shit. So, you know, you want to make joke about country music, you know, it's just Def Leppard with a cowboy hat these days, like, you know, or whatever. But even Alan Jackson makes fun of country music. You know, he says you play a country record backwards, the car comes back, the dog comes back, and the girl comes back, you know, what you think. And that's a country artist who says that, you know. But having said it, I got friends who are real country guys, and they love George Jones, and they love George Strait, and they can tell you the difference because they care. Right. Now, you go back to the 60s, Beatles era, Liverpool. Jerry and the Pacemakers, Freddie and the Dreamers, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, the Searchers, Manfred Mann, Beatles. And if you just took the singles that those bands all did for like over 2 years and you knew nothing, you'd all go, is that the same band?
Right.
They all sound exactly the same. Of course, I'll say they're not the same at all.
Of course, right.
That's Jerry and the Pacemakers. That's Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas. That's Freddie and the Dreamers. That's the Beatles. That's Peter and Gordon. They don't sound anything like each other. They do if you don't care.
Right. You're invested in it emotionally.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference.
If you don't like heavy metal, it all sounds the same.
Yep.
You don't like death metal, it's all Cookie Monster. You know, if you want to. So, you know, it's kind of like pick your music. And if you look, I love the blues. People don't like the blues. It all sounds the same.
Right.
It ain't the same. Howlin' Wolf is not the same as Sonny Boy Williamson, but they could be if you don't care.
Sure.
So
it totally makes sense.
And hairband stuff, you know, us, Rat, Warrant, White Say, all those bands that came out of the 83, 84, 85 metal scene all had the same producers.
Yep. That's out.
So we all had a similar radio sound.
Yep.
So if you didn't like it, you could easily dismiss it. Listen, if I had $1 for everybody that come up to me and goes, man, I love your band. And I go, thank you. No, man, you don't understand. You're my favorite band. And I go, no, really, thank you. Yeah, man, your song, Come Feel the Noise, is freaking unbelievable.
No. Oh man.
I go, wrong band.
I'm laughing to myself right now because Monday night I was driving home from seeing the Foo Fighters with my daughter. And my daughter loves all different types of music, right? And she's like, Dad, I like the music from the 80s, but I could always pinpoint that song came out in 1983, 85, 86, because they all have that same sound. And I said to her exactly what you just said. They were produced by the same people. She's like, but I was like, but Madonna doesn't sound like Prince. She's like, sonically it sounds the same. They're different types of music, but the sound is the same. I could tell it's the same genre. So at the same time period.
Or the same time period.
Same time period. That's what I meant. Right. So I'm laughing as you're saying this. I'm laughing. I just literally had this conversation 2 nights ago with my daughter, who's in her early 20s. So
if you don't care enough to know, you don't know.
Right. Absolutely. If you don't mind, 1 or 2 other questions here, and then we'll wrap up. Okay. So, you said in your book that you could always see, weeks ahead of time, months ahead of time, years ahead of time. What do you see next on the horizon for yourself?
Well, I am, unfortunately, I'm closer to the finish line than I am to the starting line in age. So when I was 20, I could see, being 70. Right. I'm going to be 70 next year. Right. So I'm thinking, realistically, I've got 10 healthy years left. Look, I had 2 heart operations and prostate cancer. Yep. I'm a spokesperson for Zero Prostate Cancer this year.
Yep.
Which means
how are you feeling, by the way, with that? Everything.
I mean, I don't have prostate cancer again now, but I could.
Right.
Because nothing's ever. Once you have cancer, you could have hopefully I won't die of it, but I could. Mm-hmm. I know people who had to come back after 10 years, 12 years, 14 years.
Sure.
So it could. So I think at this point in my life, I just try to take care of myself, try to eat right, get my sleep, have realistic goals. So what are my goals? Bestseller. I want the book to be a success. And I want the COVID to end enough so I can do more speaking engagements. I like that a lot. And I like writing and, see where it goes. But I'm not going to tell you, hey, man, when I'm 85, I'm going to be surfing, because I think there's a timeline to how much your body is going to just allow you to do things.
Sure.
Look, my closest friend is contemplating having his leg amputated right now because of diabetes. He's 72. Sure. I see him every day. You want to talk about reality hitting you in the face? Okay. And prostate cancer surviving. And I had 2 heart operations to solve atrial fibrillation. And my daughter has uveitis, which is a disease of the eyes, which is the leading cause of blindness among young girls in America, which is treatable. It's not curable. So things do change in life. I'm married, I'm happy, and I want to be healthy. I don't want to be sick.
Of course.
So we take all of that for granted when we're 20, 30, 40. Yep. We can't take that for granted anymore.
So true. And in the very near future here, I think you have some book signings coming up. Is that true?
Yes.
Right. I think there's one next week in New York.
On the 21st, New York City, Tuesday, the 21st. When does this go? Is this live now?
No, it'll be published tomorrow.
Okay. So on Tuesday, 5 p.m., Barnes & Noble, New York City, 5th Avenue store on 46th. I'll be doing signings. I'll be doing book signing there, 5 to 7 p.m. Got to wear a mask. You got to show that you have vaccine because they don't let you in the stores if you don't these days. You got to do that. So I'll be doing a book signing there. I'm going to Austin, Texas for a speaking engagement, and then I'm going to LA to do a signing at Barnes & Noble at the Grove on Saturday, the 26th of September. And then I'm doing a talk. Book Soup is a store in LA. I'm doing a virtual talk at Book Soup, and they're selling books through Book Soup. Then I'm coming back here, and there's talk about a jersey signing, which we haven't solidified yet. There's a talk about jersey signing. Well, so as soon as we know that, we'll post that. So we'll and I love our fans in Jersey because they've been great. Yep. Long Island's been great. Jersey's been great. Twisted has this thing here, this tri-state thing. So
without a doubt. And speaking of Twisted, my last thing, I was shocked to see you recently say, in the past you've said you never saw a reunion happening, but now you're like, I would no longer say that. Is there any plan or anything that
No, okay. I know. I said never because I meant never the last time, but then we got together again. So now you sound like an idiot.
Right. Makes sense.
So I'm never going to say never because, we got together because of 9/11 the last time, and not, God forbid, nobody wants a disaster. No. But my band answered the bell on that.
I was at that show. Great show.
Yeah, selflessly. We went and did it for all the right reasons, and came back for all the right reasons. Had the Christmas shows and the Christmas album, which was a lot of fun to do. No, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen again. I just can tell you this, though. We all had dinner last year with our wives, and nobody talked about playing. How's that?
That's awesome. I love that, actually.
Not one person even mentioned playing. Nobody. And no one even thought about that we didn't mention playing.
Right.
All we did was talk about our kids, how we're doing these days, how's your health, that kind of stuff. Nobody said it. The next day I called Danny Stanton, my tour manager. I said, God, do you realize nobody even brought up? So when people say to me this, I can tell you, we have not had a conversation.
I just love seeing the band in a happy place. I thought what you guys did on Mark's thing to honor AJ was great. That was a great hour and a half of watching. Just seeing that friendship now, all these years later, to me, is in some ways better than another show at this point.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. So
you. I think,
book?
well, just saying, we came back to do a benefit for New York Steel. Then we did a benefit for my daughter's eye issues. We did a benefit for AJ's Fallen Blue. Dee and Mark do motorcycle events. We've done shows to raise money. We came back a better band, a more mature band, a more responsible band, which runs against all the grains of heavy metal.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. But we all had kids, pretty much have kids. And so, our lives changes, we didn't have them when it all started. So it made us a better band and better people all around.
Well, through it all, you had tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, so on and so forth, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
That's what led to the success.
Twisted Method in the new book. Yep. Get the book on Amazon. You can order it now. I guess the fire department is personally ushering me out of this interview. I'd like to thank the New York City Police and Fire Department for really calling this the end.
That's right. And you could also check you out. You have your own podcast, right?
JJ French Connection Beyond the Music. I have amazing guests on that podcast. But then again, everybody has a podcast these days. That should be called the podcast. Everybody has a podcast. But I have a great podcast with great guests. And I write a Beatle column for Goldmine. And I write an audio column for Copper. And if you want to send me an email, I'll give you an inside email address, which is askjj, Jayjay, askjjts @gmail.com. And I'm on Cameo if you need me to wish somebody you love happy birthday or other kind of felicitations.
Excellent. Well, JJ, I want to thank you for you taking the time today. The book is great. I've read it. I could recommend it. Everybody watching, go out and buy it. Check out the podcast. It's great. Great success with the book. Great luck in the future with everything. Continued health for you. And
great. Thank you so much. Take care.
All righty. There you have it. I'd like to thank JJ for spending some time with me talking all about his new book, Twisted Business. Like I said before, I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. I highly recommend you going out and checking it out. I'd also like to thank Steve Wilkie for setting me up with my first contact in the JJ French camp. Thanks a lot, Steve. Really appreciate it. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. If you're listening to one of my podcasts, subscribe over there as well. Also, head on over to Facebook and follow my page, The Rock Experience with Mike Brunn, where each and every day we talk about all the rock and roll music that you love. You should also follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you all next time.